Imagine falling into the ocean 160 million years ago, and at first glance, it might look survivable. Warm water, sunlight above you, then you look down. The blue gets darker, and the bottom disappears. And somewhere beneath you are the most terrifying animals built for this version of the ocean that no human was supposed to see. Now immediately your mind goes to giant marine reptiles, something with teeth, flippers, and a skull big enough to make your entire body look extremely small. But the deeper we go, the size actually stops being the strangest thing, because eyes actually become enormous, bodies become more specialized, and once we reach the rare Jurassic environments, the animals from the deep start looking less familiar with each passing layer. So we're going down, and there's one quick rule before we do. The Jurassic lasted more than 50 million years, and there wasn't one single Jurassic ocean. These animals did not live all together in one enormous vertical aquarium. With that out of the way, we'll begin in the shallow Jurassic seas, then head offshore, then into the lower light areas, then head down towards one of the rare fossil sites that gives us a glimpse at stranger, deeper water animals. And then finally, we'll reach the bottom of this story, and that's where the problem gets worse. But near the surface, the Jurassic Sea is already had enough and is going to ruin your day. Around 199 million years ago, shallow tropical seas around what would eventually become Britain were packed with ammonites, fish, crustaceans, and marine reptiles. And immediately you'll notice that ammonites are absolutely everywhere. They look almost decorative when you see them from their fossils today. But alive, these were relatives of the squid and octopus with extending arms from the hard spiral shell. Some were only a few centimeters across, while others grew roughly as large as a bicycle wheel. So even before we reach anything enormous, you're already swimming through an ecosystem full of shelled predators, and then something appears closer to the shore, that being Pliosaurus. So imagine somebody took the basic idea of a crocodile, stretched out the snout, filled it with teeth, and sent it into the sea. These marine crocodile relatives lived and hunted in shallow Jurassic waters. Their long jaws were well suited to grabbing fish, while their armor protected the body, which means your first instinct, which is probably to try and swim to shore, is already a really bad one. And then something enormous passes underneath you, and for a second you think this has to be a predator. Well, it isn't. It's Liopleurodon. Now, I'm probably butchering that name, but Liopleurodon may have reached around 16 meters long, the largest known bony fish, with fossil evidence actually suggesting an animal comparable in length to a large bus. And somehow, this is one of the animals here I'd actually be happy to see, because Liopleurodon wasn't hunting giant marine reptiles. It was a filter feeder. It had specialized structures around the gills that strained small organisms from the water, more like a giant basking shark than a monster trying to bite you in half. So picture where we are already. You're floating in the Jurassic Ocean, and a 16-meter fish glides underneath you, and your reaction is relief, which sounds absolutely incredible to say because you're in the Jurassic. But the moment we leave the shallow shelf behind, things start to get much more serious, because now we're in the open water, and there's nowhere to stand, there's no shoreline close enough to matter, and there is no seabed visible beneath you, just large open water. And this is where the marine reptiles really start taking over. Ichthyosaurs move through the sea with streamlined bodies that can look weirdly modern when you first see them. Long jaws, flippers, some almost resemble dolphins at a glance. Except these are no dolphins. These were reptiles, and millions of years of evolution had reshaped them for life in the oceans. Then there are the pliosaurs, 4 huge flippers, broad bodies, some with long necks and comparatively small heads, but another branch took the basic body plan and went much nastier with its direction. Shorter neck, enormous head, and huge jaws. Those are the pliosaurs, and that brings us to one of the most famous prehistoric sea monsters ever put on television, the Liopleurodon. For decades, a lot of us picture this animal as a 25-meter oceanic super predator, basically an underwater kaiju, but that famous size doesn't hold up anymore. A major reevaluation published in 2026 examined the known material assigned to Liopleurodon and estimated its maximum length at only just 8 meters, far from this 25-meter oceanic predator. And I know it sounds a lot less terrifying until you look at the head. Its skull accounted for roughly a quarter of the animal's entire body length. Think about that for a second. Take an animal 8 meters long and then make its head around 2 meters. It doesn't need to be 25 meters anymore. 8 was more than enough for the size of this head. Its head is the size of you. Pliosaurs fossils show that they fed on fish and squid, while bite marks have actually been found on ichthyosaurs and other plesiosaurs. Some even fed on dinosaurs that had washed out to sea. And the Liopleurodon isn't even the size limit for pliosaurs generally. But imagine actually meeting one of these in open water. With a shark, at least we know culturally we understand the shape. The fin from above, the dark body and the teeth, but the pliosaur gives us none of that comfort. The first indication might actually be a dark mass below you, and it's getting larger. But being huge works best when you can find your prey, because as we keep descending, sunlight starts becoming less useful. Because how do you hunt when the world is getting darker to see? This is the level where light starts to fail, and this is where Ophthalmosaurus comes in. And that name gives away the important part here. Not only is it hard to pronounce, its eyes were enormous. One eye was more than 22 centimeters across. Grab an A4 sheet of paper. The short side of that page is 21 centimeters. Now imagine an eyeball wider than that sitting inside the skull of a streamlined marine reptile. And then give it another one. Those eyes were surrounded by rings of bone called sclerotic rings, helping support these enormous visual organs. And one thing is obvious from its skull. Vision mattered enormously to this animal, and in the lower light waters, every advantage matters. Now, when you are near the surface, sunlight gives you detail, but as you descend, the color starts disappearing, the contrast gets worse, and objects just start to become silhouettes. Ophthalmosaurus had a streamlined body and some of the largest eyes relative to body size of any known animal, which means it's going to see you before you see it. But that immediately creates another worse question. What exactly was worth looking for down there? You see, during the Jurassic, prey was changing too. Belemnites were everywhere in the Jurassic, squid-like cephalopods with hard internal structures. Ammonites left shells. Marine reptiles left their bones and teeth, but plenty of other animals had soft bodies, and soft bodies are a nightmare for paleontology. Which means the deeper we go, the more our picture of the Jurassic starts becoming distorted towards whatever happened to the fossils. This could mean an entire layer of the ecosystem is missing from the usual picture. Luckily though, one Jurassic fossil site did something very unusual. It preserved all the fleshy ones. This is where the water gets really weird, because around 165 million years ago in what is now the southeastern France, an unusual marine ecosystem was preserved at La Volte-sur-Rhône, and this site is ridiculous. You see, instead of giving us only teeth and shells, La Volte preserves organisms that normally vanish. The soft bodies I was talking about earlier, such as giant sea spiders, strange arthropods, brittle stars, sponges, delicate animals that had almost no business surviving for us to see 165 million years later. And one of these animals preserved sounds like somebody wanted it invented specifically for this video. Vampyronassa, a Jurassic relative of today's vampire squid. Now, modern vampire squid already sound like an animal you shouldn't make eye contact with, but despite the name, the living vampire squid isn't some hyper-aggressive ocean demon. It survives largely on drifting organic material and small prey. Its Jurassic relative, however, appears to have had a different lifestyle. Detailed examination of Vampyronassa found specialized suckers along its enormous arms consistent with actively catching prey. Research interpreted it as more an active predator than its modern relative, which sounds absolutely wonderful until you hear it backwards: prehistoric vampire squid in the water where you are. It is going to suck the life out of you, because you assume that name was just for show, and then the fossil evidence actually tells us that this Jurassic version is more predatory than the one we have today. Now, it wasn't absolutely enormous, it didn't need to be. Picture a compact, soft-bodied hunter moving through offshore Jurassic waters, using arms lined with muscular suckers to seize smaller animals. It didn't have a 2-meter skull, nor 30-meter body, a completely different solution to killing you and killing other things. And Vampyronassa wasn't alone. La Volte also preserved sea spiders. Not actual spiders, but animals with incredibly small central bodies and long legs radiating outwards. Then there's Dolichoris, and Dolichoris had eyes that almost certainly comically over-engineered. Researchers reconstructed enormous compound eyes and estimated around 18,000 lenses in each one. 18,000 lenses per each eye. And interestingly, these eyes might actually complicate the idea that this layer was extremely dark. You see, a detailed study concluded its particular visual system was better suited to illuminated conditions, rather than the complete darkness that we find ourselves in now. But this proves something to our story, because a real Jurassic ocean doesn't behave like a video game level. You don't have level 1, level 2, level 3. You don't cross a certain amount of meters and unlock the next nightmare creature. The habitats actually overlap. Different layers obviously receive different amounts of light. Some predators follow the prey, which could go towards the light, could go towards the bottom of the ocean. Because we're going to keep going here, past the huge eyes, past the predatory vampire squids, and we're going to head towards the bottom, level 5. Eventually, after staring into blue-black water for what feels like forever, shapes start appearing beneath you. And at first they almost look like plants, but some aren't. These are crinoids, which are actually animals, relatives of starfish and sea urchins. They anchor themselves to the seabed and extend feeding arms into the current. Parts of Jurassic seafloors could support crinids and large sponge communities, and have been compared with communities found today in deeper continental slopes. So imagine finally reaching the bottom and you expect empty mud. Instead you find structure, sponges rising from the seabeds, brittle stars moving across the bottom, crustaceans hiding amongst them. And the soft body animals are moving through the water overhead. Because this deeper water horror works differently from the surface. At the surface, danger is easy to understand. The large heads, the large teeth, very, very bad. But down here, you may not even understand what you're actually looking at. One animal is mostly legs, another is hidden inside its shell, another may be almost completely soft. This is an alien world, and importantly, the deep Jurassic Sea probably wasn't just an endless traffic jam of giant predators. The deep water ecosystem tends to have less energy available. Finding food using less light is extremely hard. You'd have to sense the movement before the prey even senses you. You'd have to grab whatever opportunity gets close enough. Very much like the anglerfish luring prey in. And honestly, this fascinates me more than simply making every animal bigger and bigger and bigger. Because once the environment removes the options and survival becomes harder, evolution starts to do strange things to cope with the environment. But this is also where we hit the wall, because not the physical bottom of the Jurassic Ocean, I mean what we actually can reconstruct. Now, don't get me confused, I don't mean there's some secret 100-foot monster waiting to be discovered, although there could be. That would be easy. The real problem is more frustrating than that. The fossil record is biased. You see, the hard shells preserve better than the soft ones, like we told earlier. The teeth preserve better than skin. And sites preserving deep water Jurassic animals in exceptional detail are extremely rare. So when we reconstruct the Jurassic Ocean, we're not building the full cast of characters here. We're building it from the animals that survived fossilization. You gotta remember, this is 150 million years ago. We know Animates were abundant because of their shells. We know ichthyosaurs existed because their skeletons preserved. Pliosaurs attacked other marine reptiles, and their bones had the scars and was kept as evidence. But imagine the lineage of soft-bodied predators. They could live for millions of years, hunt, reproduce, die, and almost nothing is left behind. So every layer we've descended through has changed everything what we can see. Near the surface, we could see the marine crocodiles, giant fish, ammonites. The open water, we could see the ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, pliosaurs. Then you move into the poorer light conditions, the thing with the giant eye, Vampyronassa, sea spiders, and then you move into the soft-bodied animals. And that's where the evidence starts thinning out. And not because life stopped, it's just we cannot know what was there. And that, for me, is the part I find genuinely creepy. What was living in that era? Some large, fleshy creature? We will never know. And I know it sounds crazy, but the Jurassic Oceans already gave us animals that sound made up. So if you find yourself somehow with a time machine and floating on the surface 160 million years ago, I don't think the worst animal necessarily will be the Liopleurodon. At least you could see that coming, because when you look down and things start to get darker and darker and darker, which reminds me, what was in Jurassic World's other dark lagoon? Because there was far more than just a Mosasaurus there. Massive thanks for watching to the end, and a massive thanks to the InGen research team who are on screen now. And if you came across a Liopleurodon out in the open ocean, could your day go any worse? You bet Jurassic can. Catch you later.